The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is a one-sided love story between a rich old Saudi man and a beautiful poor Indian girl. It was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. It is a story that narrated in 6 books. Book 1. The Arab Sugar Daddy falls in love with a beautiful poor Indian girl. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from the review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictitious and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 40. Searching for the beloved Indian Layla in the Holy Land. Upon his arrival in the kingdom of Tartarus, the Arab Sugar Daddy, the mad Arab Qais, began his obsessive search for his missing beloved Indian Layla, the maid Rayhana Khan, and her cute daughter Ifit at the Jeddah International Airport itself. He has not even gone to his residence, but is determined to take his beloved Layla with him home so he can begin enjoying his honeymoon with her. When the airport officer checked his computer, he did not find any record of Rayhana Khan or Ifit Khan arriving from the country of India. Sheikh Ahmed checked with 3 other airport offices before he came to terms with the fact he had lost love again. The first thought that arose in his head was that his former car driver had fooled him once again. He jumped to a hasty conclusion that Muhammad Khan had failed to locate his beloved maidservant and her daughter, and then to hide his inadequacies. He came up with that unbelievable story that Rayhana and her daughter traveled from Bombay to Jeddah without their Indian passports. He concluded that the evil man fabricated the whole story because he feared that he might break up his partnership with him. He remembered the unjustly imprisoned Sudanese student Babakar told him he had found Rayhana and gave her the air tickets, Saudi visas, Indian money, and the $500 he had sent to her. But he did not say she went to the international airport to take her flight to Saudi Arabia. He also recalled at the Worli passport office he was informed that the 2 passports were reissued and mailed to the office of Muhammad Tours and Travels instead of Babakar Apartments' address at the Vakola colony. When Sheikh Ahmed reached this unavoidable conclusion, he then regretted his hasty decision to punish his Indian client so fast. But he knows he cannot go back to Bombay so soon to search for his beloved Layla again, for he is afraid that if he returned to India so quickly, Muhammad Khan might hire dangerous Muslim Gandas to attack him in retaliation for his public humiliation and cheating about the profitable nurses' visas. He also knows that Muhammad Khan has spies everywhere, and he would be informed the minute he arrived at the Bombay Sahara International Airport through his spy. Actually, upon their arrival, the names of Rayhana Khan and her daughter Ifit Khan's arrival had not been entered into the computer system at the Jeddah International Airport because they had been considered illegal aliens. Therefore, their arrival was considered to be an illegal entry and a criminal offense. The case was transferred to the airport security and passed on to the police division. Sheikh Ahmed would have known their detention and where they were imprisoned if he had checked with the airport security. The desperate lover Qais has lost all hope and thought he would never find or see his lovely Layla again. He sat down on one of the airport benches and sorrowfully took Rayhana's passport out of his suitcase and peered at her photo when tears began to stream down his cheeks. Her innocent face and marvelous beauty troubled his heart and made him feel like screaming out in pain to release all the heartache accumulating inside him. Staring at the photo of his beloved Layla, his heart bled and tears watered his long beard. He blamed all his troubles on his wicked ex-chauffeur, and he began working out 2 possible scenarios in his mind: how to find his missing Layla and how to give Muhammad Khan a double dose of cruel revenge. While the distraught Qais is sitting at the international airport and trying to find a way to locate his missing Layla, his cell phone suddenly begins to ring. He removed the cell phone from his pocket and looked at the number. He did not recognize the phone number calling him, so he has not bothered to answer it. The cell phone continued to ring, and he waited to see whether or not the caller was going to leave a message. He suddenly heard a harsh voice saying, "This is Jeddah Airport Police." This message is for Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed. It is regarding your Indian maidservant Rayhana Khan and her daughter Ifat Khan. Your maidservant arrived in Jeddah along with her 7-year-old daughter without their Indian passports. They have been arrested by law enforcement authorities and transferred to the Jeddah Detention for Women. For further information, please contact the Jeddah Police Authority. Sheikh Ahmed has never kissed his cell phone before that day. He felt as if Allah saw the sad status of his true heart and had mercy upon him. God has sent his archangel Gabriel on his chariot of fire and a double-edged sword in his hand to guide his path to the most exquisite object of his desire. He immediately jumped on his feet as if he were a 28-year-old Arab superstar soccer player, just like Mohamed Salah of Liverpool. He decided to go confirm the message he had just received from the airport police. On second thought, he dismissed that idea and decided to go directly to the Jeddah Women's Jail and effect the release of his beloved Rayhana and her little cute daughter Ifat. Sheikh Ahmed said to himself, "Why should I waste my time going to the airport police authority? I have already received the good news from them, and I should go directly and get my beloved woman Layla out of jail with her cute little girl." Sheikh Ahmed married many Saudi women, but he did not love any of those Arab wives. The very first time he had ever fallen in love, it was a one-sided love affair. His former foreign wife, Christy, an Indian Christian, was the first woman he had ever fallen madly in love with. His second love is Rayhana Khan, an Indian Muslim woman too, and it is also a one-sided love affair. His present 3 Saudi wives are all old and begot many sons and daughters, and their boys and girls had already been married and given him grandchildren. His 4th Saudi wife is 32 years old. According to the Arab criteria, the woman is considered too old to have sex with her once she is 30 years of age. The most desirable marriage age for a female is somewhere between 9 years old to 13 years of age. In big cities, the age would range between 14 to 19 years. Arabs believe that when a woman reaches 20 years old, as she continues to grow, her body becomes rigid and less flexible day by day. In the Arab world, a woman's virginity is particularly important, exceedingly desirable, very crucial and imperative for marrying a virgin girl. A female whose virginity has been lost or stolen from her through rape would either be killed on the wedding night or sent back to her parents. In some Arab tribes, the bridegroom or his mother would wrap his or her finger with a white handkerchief and insert it into the vagina of the bride. If the bride is a virgin, the finger and handkerchief should be supposed to come out stained red with blood because the hymen would bleed when it is broken. If the bride has already been devirginized, the handkerchief would come out wet by the moisture of her non-virgin pussy. In that case, the bride does not pass the virginity test, and the consequences would be dire for her and her parents. In some backward Muslim countries, the virginity test might be done before marriage. Whenever the girl exhibits suspicious behavior or immoral conduct, or if there is a rumor the girl is in love with a boy before marriage, a girl in this case would be subjected to a virginity test. Her mother, aunt, or other close female relatives, female neighbors, or reliable old women would secretly conduct the test. It is a local test in which the girl would be stripped of all her clothes. When she became fully naked, she would be asked to immerse her body in a tub filled with water. The water has to cover her body up to her waist. Then, she would be asked to cease any movement and hold her breath. Her examiners would examine the surface of the water to see if there were any bubbles. When the expert examiners are fully satisfied there is not a single bubble to arise or be seen on the surface of the water, the girl would pass the virginity test and she would be declared a sealed virgin. The virginity female qualifiers believe that the non-virgin vagina would suck in some water, and that would cause bubbles to come up. I have no clue whether that is the correct way to test the virginity of a female. There is a test even more silly and primitive than that. Some people believe the virginity test could be carried out without the knowledge of the intended female test taker. This kind of test is common among men, but old women do not accept its result. According to this test, it is proof positive if a girl is either a virgin or not through her footprints on the sand. If her footprints show full marks of her bare feet on the sand, then she is not a virgin. If her footprints reveal half marks of her feet on the sand, then she is a virgin. The danger to these kinds of primitive ideas and idiotic myths and old wives' tales is that many innocent girls might not find men to marry them, or worse than that, they might get slain by a close male relative in an honor killing. The girl might also lose her virginity through some sickness or heavy bleeding due to heavy menstruation, or some girls might break their hymens accidentally while they are practicing masturbation. After all, masturbation is not forbidden in Islam. There is not a single verse in the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad that forbids masturbation. There is a fatwa issued by a Muslim scholar who encouraged Muslim women to masturbate when they have a strong desire for sex, but have no lawful husbands to satisfy them. According to the fatwa, if a Muslim woman felt a great need or desire for sex and she has no husband, then she could take a cranbridge leather shaped like a penis and insert it inside her vagina and rub it until she gets satisfied. The greatest Muslim scholar, Ibn Qayyim, writes, if a woman does not have a husband and her lust becomes strong, then some of our scholars say it is permissible for the woman to take in a cranbridge, which is a piece of leather worked until it becomes shaped like a penis, and insert it in her pussy. She may also use a cucumber. If some religious followers in India are accused of worshipping the private parts of males, such as the Indian Jains, some Arab men should also be accused of worshipping the woman's virginity. A woman's virgin pussy to the Arabs is like the cross to Christians. The black stone, which Muslim pilgrims touch and kiss during their Hajj ritual, is a leftover tradition from ancient pagan idol worship of the female's private parts. The ancient Arabs used to worship the woman's vagina, and hence the black stone is shaped like a female's private parts. In those days, the Hajj was called hak, which means rubbing of the body. Pagan women used to rub their bodies on the Kaaba and apply menstrual blood on the black stone to increase their fertility. The pagan men and women would perform the ritual while they were bare naked. Women used to perform the Hajj during the night while they were bare naked, and men buck naked during the day. Today, Muslims perform the same ritual without wearing underwear. Islam incorporated the pagan rituals of the hak with slight variations. The hak was a kind of temple prostitution. Women offered themselves to men as part of their pagan idol worship, which consisted of many male gods and female goddesses. The black stone was considered the cornerstone of temple worship, revolving around female prostitution. Although Islam removed the idols from the pagan temple, one idol that remained was left untouched, the black stone, which is in the shape of the woman's pussy. The black stone was the only idol spared, and the hak was reborn as the Hajj. Pagan hak worshippers were newborn Muslim pilgrims and worshippers of the one moon god, Allah. Therefore, the pagan rites and immoral rituals and the demonic practices between men and women continued and remain the same today. An Egyptian Muslim scholar by the name of Dr. Sayyid Mahmoud al-Kimni said that the present black stone is in the shape of a woman's pussy because, in those days, the pagans worshipped the private parts of the female. That was why women used to apply the blood of their menstruation on the vagina-shaped black stone. Today, a Muslim female might not be able to reach the stone due to the crowd, but she is required to point her right hand toward it from afar. The Muslim man must kiss the black stone at least once during his 7 circles around the Kaaba. The kissing of the black stone in Islamic theology has no spiritual significance, but Muslim men do it because the Prophet Muhammad used to kiss it whenever he performed his Hajj rituals. Muhammad used to practice these pagan rituals before he claimed to be the prophet of God. He even fasted Ramadan as a Baal believer with his pagan family from childhood. Baal was the name of the main god of the Canaanites. The second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, said while he was kissing the black stone, "I know you are just stone and can do no good or bad to me, but I am kissing you because I saw the messenger of Allah kissing you." Umar might not have known why the Prophet Muhammad had kissed the black stone, but for the pagans, kissing the black stone was a form of worshipping the woman's vagina. Muslim men today are continuing this pagan rite in worshipping this private organ of the female body. Until today, Muslim men go around the black stone and kiss it while they are semi-naked. Hajj is the most horrifying and immoral experience a Muslim woman could ever have in her life. A white Muslim woman who converted to Islam and performed the Hajj with her sister and brother-in-law made the following comments on their visit to the holy place of Muslims. Her name is Zina. Zina said, "What I saw in Al-Masjid al-Haram was the worst sight of all." Masjid al-Haram is the biggest sacred mosque in the world. It is the largest mosque for the Hajj pilgrims. Located in the city of Mecca, it surrounds the Kaaba, the place that Muslims worldwide turn towards while performing daily prayers, and is Islam's holiest place. Zina continued to say, "I saw almost 1 million people squished in that small place, sleeping on the floor, on the steps, and even in washrooms. Eating their food in public toilets was itself gross. There was no place to perform Hajj peacefully. There was not even enough place to breathe fresh air. There was a sea of human beings, public bathrooms and toilets were full of feces and urine, and on top of that people were sleeping in those places, eating food, and exposing their small kids to those extremely noxious and contaminating environmental conditions where there was nothing but human filth and stink. Everyone was coughing and was sick. So many people were having food poisoning, including myself." Citing Hajj, My Broken Dream, by Zina. Zina continued to say, "During Tawaf, when we have to take 7 circles around Kaaba, I saw men squishing and squeezing other people without caring for anyone. I was shocked to see their aggressive behavior. Everyone wanted to go into that place and be done with 7 circles. So many people died because of the stampede, and I saw them dying, and other people jumping on their dead bodies without any feeling. While I was doing my circles, all of a sudden I saw a few groups of black Nigerians and Somali men, and also Iranian men jump inside, pushing others, including women. It was such a chaotic gathering that I was shocked and I was becoming speechless. All I was experiencing and observing were people pushing and pulling the weaker, physically letting them die, and then running over their dead bodies. A point came when these groups came closer to me. I felt my whole body being squeezed forcefully from both sides, and I felt as if I was dying any time, and I didn't feel that I could breathe till I gathered my whole strength and screamed, 'Stop it, you animals. Enough is enough. What use of this Hajj if you have no feelings for your fellow humans?' All of a sudden, I felt some kind hand pull me out of the psychotic crowd, and that was my own sister, who rescued me out. Thank God, it was the end of my last circle. I was pale, shivering, nauseous, and dizzy. All my dreams about performing Hajj were shattered by now. All I saw was extreme selfishness, filth, extreme cruelty, aggression, and psychopathic behaviors. Where was the main essence of Hajj? Where was humanity? Where were the humans? The majority of people were not humans, yes, they were acting like some jungle beasts who were struggling for survival." Zina summarized her horrifying experiences by saying, "It is a violation of human rights to allow 2 million people, including young children, to gather together in the name of religion called Hajj, subject to die, being plundered, wounded, being exposed to different diseases, sleeping with feces and urine, women being exposed to strangers in an unethical way, being used in the name of religion, being discriminated racially and based on gender, being divided as rich and poor, being hijacked by Saudi thugs, being cheated by Hajj mafia, Hajj companies, being tormented by fellow humans." Returning now to our main topic of the importance of a woman's virginity, some Muslims in France began to pay huge amounts of money to doctors in an attempt to return their wives to a virginal state. A Muslim man in Paris is prepared to pay a French doctor $5,000 to restore his wife's virginity. He enjoys repeating the process of deflowering his wife. By doing so, he presupposed that this might be a substitute for polygamy, which French law does not allow him to practice in France. Breaking the woman's hymen is painful, but those Arab barbarians do not care about the suffering of their wives. Some Muslim men will not marry girls until they produce their virginity certificates from recognized French doctors. However, recently, according to a BBC report, the French government forbids doctors to perform virginity tests and produce those certificates. Even though it has become illegal to produce those virginity certificates, a female French doctor said during her interview with the Arabic BBC that she and other doctors still secretly give those official virginity certificates to help those unmarried Muslim girls getting married to Muslim bridegrooms who want to know their brides are still virgins. Chapter 41. The Greatest 7 Poems Composed on the Love of the Arab Woman. Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed seems to have discovered that there is something more lovable and enjoyable in the woman than her vagina and virginity. It is the greatest mystery of God's creation, namely the beauty of the love of the woman. God is love. On his many visits to India, the Saudi man, Sheikh Ahmed's emotional and sexual attitudes toward women improved somewhat. He discovered that there is nothing better than a woman giving her heart, body, and soul in love to a man to please him. Even if it is a one-sided love, the love of a beautiful woman would give a man the happiest days of his life. In this way, his first experience in love with his Indian wife, the lovely Christie, made his life exceedingly wonderful and so much enjoyable. During those few months he lived with her, he came to love life to the fullest measure. Before that, he was such a materialistic and selfish man. He used to use women for sexual satisfaction, but had never loved them nor had been loved by those women he used and abused. After his first love experience, he discovered a great secret, which has been hidden from all the men of his country. He eventually came to realize that a man could not possibly love or practically enjoy sex with more than one woman. So, he discovered that polygamy is a kind of abuse and oppression of women and torture for the man. Having 2, 3, or 4 wives at the same time would mean countless troubles for the man, and his life would be a living hell on earth. Rival wives would fight to be the alpha female, and this would go on day and night, and cause much misery for the man. He would wish he was in hell wearing a pair of gasoline underwear. Instead, he has to live with these demon-possessed rival wives in real life and wish for death in the afterlife as an escape from the turmoil and conflict in his own house. Alas, whereas his first love story was a one-sided love affair and ended in a train wreck, nonetheless, the joy and happiness he had felt during that short-lived love affair would never be forgotten. He cherished and treasured it in his heart for an exceedingly long time. He longs for a similar experience no matter how it turns out. Then, his good luck brought him another much beloved Indian woman. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, every human being is a lover and looking for a beloved one. The old Saudi man believes he fell in love with the lovely slum woman at first sight. If he loved the lovely Christie 1,000 times over, he loves the beautiful Rayhana 1,000,000 times more. From the time she met him at the gate of India in Colaba, the fires of love were rekindled in his heart. He believes that Rayhana has reawakened in him the power of the love of Christie. When he was in school, he read about the love of a woman in thousands of poems in classic Arabic literature without experiencing it. There is no other race of human beings on the surface of this planet Earth that had written more beautifully or wonderfully about the love of a man and a woman than in the poems of the ancient Arabs. But once Islam was founded, it forbade forever any relationship whatsoever between men and women before marriage. The restrictions Islam placed on women resulted in untold evils and despicable punishments to women known as honor killings. Before Islam, the Arabs delighted in the love, romance, and beauty of the woman. They wrote the renowned 7 poems known as Mu'allaqat. These are overly sweet and deliberate writings of love. The poetic writings were so loved and revered by the Arabs of pre-Islamic periods, they began to hang these popular poems on the holy Kaaba at Mecca, which is known today as the House of Allah. Islam outlawed love and destroyed that golden period of Arabian poetry reflecting the intimacies between a man and a woman. Sheikh Ahmed read thousands of poems and writings of ancient Arab lovers and poets and memorized them by heart. Even so, love did not make sense to him until he began to go out of his man-dominated society and see beautiful young women walking all alone on the streets of Bombay with their faces and hair exposed. He even saw young women while they were walking in the streets wearing short pants and shirts and jeans with their beautiful faces opened and half of their sexy bodies nude and visibly exposed. The emotionally enlightened Arab man had also visited the coastal paradise-like city of Goa and saw the beautiful young Indian women and European girls in their sexy bikinis lying on the golden sandy beaches while they were sunbathing in the warm sunny climate. From afar, he could see and make out whether a woman or girl had a nice body or a beautiful face or not. In Dubai and other coastal Gulf cities in the Middle East, there are beaches for men and beaches for women and strictly separated from each other as if they are public washrooms. If a daring man comes close to the women's beach, he might either get shot dead by the armed female guards or get arrested and thrown behind bars awaiting a serious trial as if he raped many women. In Sheikh Ahmed's country, Saudi Arabia, women are wrapped up head to feet in clothing called abayas and niqabs, and nothing can be seen of her except her black cocoon. The Saudi woman is like a single watermelon you buy at the supermarket. One cannot know whether she's beautiful or has a sexy body until he purchases her first and then opens her up. She is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Some you like and some are awful. The style of the female clothing is the abaya and niqab. However, the curtains in a funeral parlor are much more pleasant to look at than seeing a woman in a niqab or burqa. The queen of God's creation is now a phantom of evil, a ghost in the minds of men. She should not be seen and not heard her voice too. The most beautiful creation of God, the woman, is covered from head to toe in a black coffin and detained in her house as if she is an extremely dangerous wild beast. God has created the woman beautifully because he wants man to see her and enjoy her beauty and praise him for his great creation. At any rate, Sheikh Ahmed arrived at the Jeddah women's jail with the 2 Indian passports in his hand, as if they were won in the green card lottery and issued by the United States of America. He has come with the attitude of receive and release. He expected that he would show the 2 passports and receive his beloved Layla and her cute daughter. After all, he has a million plans running through his crooked mind. When the policewomen told him that there were no female detainees by those names, he felt as if someone threw a bucket of cold water on him. He argued with the Saudi policewomen and insisted that they were mistaken until they threatened to throw him behind bars if he did not leave. Pissed off by their response, the enraged lover Qais left the women's Jeddah jail, headed directly back to the international airport, and demanded an explanation and accurate information about his beloved maidservant and her daughter. The airport police confirmed the information he received on his cell phone. However, they said they had no idea where the 2 Saudi police officers had taken his Indian maidservant and her daughter. They also refused to reveal the names of the 2 Saudi police officers or the number of the police car that was used to transfer the 2 Indian female detainees. This last bit of information brought Sheikh Ahmed to his knees and his renewed and short-lived hopes to a dead end. He is back to square one. Once again, the old Saudi managed to crawl back upon his feet and dragged himself back to the same bench he had sat upon before he received the phone message from the airport police about the arrival and detention of his beloved Indian Layla and her cute daughter. While he is sitting, this time he is not trying to figure out how to punish his bitter enemy, the dangerous lunatic man Muhammad Khan, but rather, how to find his beloved Rayhana and her cute daughter Ifat. Suddenly, a great dread has come over him and his heart is filled with gloom. He started to murmur to no one in particular. More than fear, sheer terror has paralyzed both his body and mind and made him speak to himself twisted things as if he has become truly the madman Qais who lost his lovely Layla forever. Every single hair on his body stood up. He has no hair on his bald head, but he is a very hairy man. His whole body is full of hair as if he is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Pale, reddish hair covered his hands, feet, chest, back, and neck in the front and from behind, not including his brush-like mustache and a long beard that looked like an old dirty broom. Fear, dread, and terror have begun to pain his heart and physically impair his ability to function when he begins to visualize the body of his beloved Layla lying in the Sahara Desert underneath the unforgiving heat of the sun. Sheikh Ahmed feared that the 2 Saudi police officers had seen the marvelous beauty and sexually appealing body of Rayhana and decided to rape her. They then raped and killed her to cover up their crime and dumped her body in the desert. He imagined that by now, the hot gusty sand winds had already buried her naked and brutally raped body and he would never see her again. He concluded they had also raped her 7-year-old daughter and killed her too. Sheikh Ahmed knows that Saudi men cannot be trusted with a beautiful woman, especially if she has her face, hands, and legs open in a public place. He understood in his country, a man would not spare a female if he found her all alone, even in an elevator. Therefore, he concluded that the two Saudi police officers took advantage of his beautiful Indian woman being without a man to protect her, and hence, instead of taking her to the women's prison, they took her to a deserted place out of town for their sexual pleasure. They drove her in their police vehicle out of the city, raped her and her little daughter, and murdered them, leaving their dead bodies to rot in the desert. The lustful old geezer has never cried so much in all his life as he did today. He had not cried this much even the day his lovely wife Christy threw him out of his opulent house while her left foot on his ass. He began to sob uncontrollably, putting his face in the palm of his hands, trying to hide his tears. Instead, his tears have exposed his weakness and the deep sorrow rent in his heart. The fear and dread that captured the heart of Sheikh Ahmed are based upon practical evidence. Hundreds of maidservants from Asian countries who come alone to work in this male-dominated society get raped every day. It is a society where the woman is considered to be fresh, eatable meat and imprisoned in the house, and she is never allowed to come out without a male chaperone. And if she is allowed to step out of the house, she has to have her husband or a male muharram for protection, or she will be raped. Female foreigners who come from free societies are always the victims of this unholy Arab empire of rapists and pedophiles. In a Western country such as Australia, a Muslim imam justified the rape of white girls by Lebanese Muslim men. I have mentioned this before, but allow me to refer to it once again. I believe this is the right place to put it. The Australian Islamic imam and Mufti Sheikh Taj Din al-Hilali, the Muslim nation's most senior Muslim cleric, said in his public sermon, which he delivered before 5,000 Muslim worshippers in Sydney on the occasion of the Eid festival, that women are just meat, and men have no more obligation to exercise restraint when they see women than a cat does when meat is left out in the open. The imam was speaking about the increasing social phenomenon of young Australian women getting raped regularly by Lebanese men and other Muslim immigrants in Sydney, Australia. He blamed the innocent victims of rape rather than their evil rapists. According to him, the Australian non-Muslim women, the so-called female infidels, go out in public around town on the streets with exposed bodies without wearing abayas, hijabs, niqabs, or burqas. And the Muslim men see their unclothed bodies as exposed meats, and that is why they rape them. To justify his theory, he gave an example in the case of a cat when it finds meat on the street and then eats it up. For him, the cat could not be blamed, but the person who dropped the meat on the street is the one who should be blamed. Therefore, he concluded his religious speech by saying the rapist should not be blamed at all, but the non-Muslim woman or infidel girl who leaves her body exposed and uncovered without Islamic clothes is wholly to blame. What an evil man he is to teach these things as a religious leader and instructor of the masses. He ought to be locked up for life for encouraging men to commit crimes against innocent women and commit evil deeds against their fellow sisters in humanity and Australian society. Even the 5,000 Muslims who listened to his antisocial sermon and did not object should be kicked out of Australia and all the Western countries and all other free democratic societies. They should not be allowed to flourish amidst productive, thriving nations, lands, and peoples, but return to their own ever-increasing closed, sick-minded, oppressive governments. They should go back to their own country and lands where the women are treated like meat, covered from head to feet in oppression, and imprisoned in the home like criminals. The most dangerous places for women on earth are in Muslim countries. In the West, a young woman can live by herself in a building full of men, and it will be unlikely that anyone will knock on her door or break in to rape her. In a Muslim country, it is not permitted for a single woman to live alone. No property owner is allowed by law to give an apartment for rent to an unmarried woman. Even in a hotel, the law will not allow a single woman, whatever her age, to check in if she has no husband, father, brother, or adult son with her. They have to produce official government documents to prove their relationship before they will be allowed to stay together in a hotel. If a married couple wants to stay in a hotel, they have to produce their marriage certificate. A father has to show official documentation to prove that the woman who has come with him is his daughter, and a brother and sister have to show their passports to prove their siblingship relationship. In 1983, my sister and I were denied a room in a hotel in Cairo. We had our passports, but they refused to accept them as proof because my sister and I had different fathers, but the same mother. When all hotels refused to allow us to check in, we were fortunate to be able to stay with the Sudanese family in their apartment. In Saudi Arabia, a woman without a man to protect her would be raped inside an elevator if she dares to leave her apartment to visit her female neighbor's apartment. It is said that if a young woman stretches one leg out of her door and her other leg still inside her house, she would be raped. For that reason, an Arab man does not trust any other man with his wives and daughters. More seriously, the Arab man does not trust his woman either. They believe a woman has no control over herself and has a strong tendency to cheat on her husband with any man. Simply put, no man should trust his wife. This stems from yet another Islamic tradition. The Islamic tradition said, 4 things can never be trusted: the money, sultan, time, and woman, even if you have lived with her for a very long time, quoted in Sayyid al-Kimni, Rab al-Zaman, the Lord of this time. Women in Religious Heritage and Legends 1996, page 220. I know a case of a Muslim Arab student who married a Muslim Indian girl in Bombay. They lived in a rented apartment in the same building that I was living in at that time. Many families lived in the same building. Whenever he went out, he locked the door with a huge padlock, and his wife remained locked up in the apartment until he returned. He seemed never to bother if his wife got burned alive in case of fire, or she bled to death in the event of having accidentally cut her hand while cooking in the kitchen, or fell off in the tub at the bathroom and injured her head or body. Some of his friends had advised him that if he is afraid of someone coming in when he is not there and breaking into his apartment and raping his wife in his absence, he should just ask her to lock the door from inside the apartment. He simply replied, "I am locking her up because I don't trust men around her, and I don't trust her either." Chapter 42. The arrival of the lovely Indian maidservant in the Holy Land. When the Indian maidservant Rayhana Khan and her cute daughter arrived at Jeddah International Airport, she removed her shoes and told her female child to remove her shoes too, because they were standing on holy ground and there were angels of Allah all around them. Then Rayhana knelt on her knees and kissed the sacred sand with her lips. She took some dust in her hands, sprinkled it on her daughter's head, and blessed her. After that, she took some more dust, rubbed it on her head, and blessed herself. Then, she hugged her beloved daughter and said to her, "We have reached the holy land of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Here is the holy house of Allah and lies the shrine of our blessed Prophet Muhammad. May the prayers and peace of Allah be upon him." Rayhana is so simple, illiterate, and naive woman who has never been to school or traveled out of her country before. She knows nothing about the outside world. When she arrived at the city of Jeddah, she thought she had reached the 2 holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Before she landed in the Holy Land, Rayhana was not a religious woman at all, but that day she felt as if she was on a pilgrimage to the holiest of holies. She thought that she and her daughter had fulfilled the dream of every Muslim in the world by visiting the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad and where's his sacred tomb in Medina city, and they are circling 7 times around the Black Kaaba of the House of Allah in the city of Mecca. Rayhana expected that as soon as she entered the holy city, she would see the holy men and righteous women of Allah filling the streets in pilgrim garb, and money would be scattered on the streets like garbage filled the streets of Bombay. Everything around here looks so beautiful and clean. She could not believe her eyes when she looked everywhere without seeing one piece of garbage or one wretched and destitute child. Rayhana could not see cigarette butts beneath her feet or walls of spit lined with red stains of the Indian tobacco called pan. Rayhana's eyes could not spot one single beggar. In Bombay, beggars could be found everywhere, just like flies during the day and mosquitoes at night. Those poor Indian beggars are as numerous as flies hovering over garbage containers or mosquitoes in gutters and swamps. While they were walking inside the international airport at the arrival area, Rayhana felt as if she was walking on a street of glass shining like the sun. She can see the reflection of her beautiful image in the glassy white marble from which the floor is made. While she is walking, her head is turning in all directions as if it is a table fan. She wants to see everything because she has never before seen such an amazing sight. Meanwhile, her innocent heart is overflowing with so much joy. Her joy suddenly is clouded with sorrow when she remembers the only handsome man that she has ever fallen in love with. She wished that her lover Jamal Khan was walking right beside her and holding her hand. The memory of Jamal has made her turn her face to her little daughter, who is walking by her side and looking incredibly happy. She bent down, kissed her daughter on her cheek, and whispered in her ear, "Allah has blessed the people of His holy land because they are good Muslims and worship Him only." Rayhana made a quick contrast between the misery and poverty of the people of India and the happiness and richness of the people of the Holy Land that she has come to live in with her daughter for the next 2 years. The comparison led her to believe that Allah has cursed the people of India because they are evil idol worshippers, and the people of the Holy Land have been blessed by Allah because they are good Muslims and worship the only true God. She also thought that she and her family were living in utter poverty in India and misery in that filthy and hellish slum area of Dharavi because they were not following or worshipping their Allah properly. When she came to that realization, Rayhana decided as soon as she reached the house of her good sponsor, she would begin to pray 5 times a day, and she would never allow any man to touch her body if he was not her lawful Muslim husband. She even asked Allah to forgive her for allowing her lover Jamal Khan to touch her body and kiss her lips. She also blamed herself for doing great haram by allowing Jamal, who is not her lawful husband, to touch areas of her private body, such as her large backside, and fondle her bare breasts when they used to sit together at the seashore of Marine Drive in the Queen Necklace. While she is still walking in that glassy place, Rayhana has repented for the terrible sins that she had committed with her lover and made a solemn vow to her exalted Allah and her gracious Prophet that she would never repeat such abominable haram acts again. Even if the richest man in the world has promised to give her 1,000,000 rupees and decked her body from head to foot with pure gold and precious diamonds, she will not allow him to hug her and kiss her if he is not her husband. She then asked Allah to bless her with a successful life while she is living in His holy land, and after 2 years unite her in an Islamic halal matrimonial relationship with her Muslim handsome lover, Jamal Khan. And both as Muslim husband and wife will have many sons and daughters, and then they shall live a happy married life. Unfortunately, things do not go well with Rayhana and her daughter upon arriving at the first airport security checkpoint. When they were asked by the airport security to show their valid Indian passports, they said they did not have them. Rayhana said their passports are kept with the black Negro boy. The security official repeated his question 3 times, thinking the dumb Indian woman did not understand what he is asking her. He is talking to Rayhana through an Indian female interpreter. Each time Rayhana has given him the same answer, and each time he does not believe her. He refused to believe that 2 Indian female passengers could fly from India to Saudi Arabia without their passports. Finally, he became fed up and contacted the flight crew of the Saudi plane that brought Rayhana and her daughter Ifat from Bombay. He was shocked when he discovered that the 2 Indian passengers had somehow entered the Saudi plane without their passports. Since the aircraft is a Saudi plane, this is considered by him to be a terrible infraction. He informed his senior officer and asked him what to do with the 2 Indian female passengers who had arrived in the country without passports. Without asking why or how the 2 female passengers arrived without their passports, the second airport officer gave the order for the 2 female passengers to be returned as soon as possible on the next flight back to India. Now the 2 questions before the Saudi airport officials are which plane should take them back and who is going to pay for their return tickets. The 2 Indian female passengers arrived with one-way tickets and Saudi visas. First, the International Airport Police contacted the Saudi airline and informed them of the 2 Indian female passengers and requested they fly them back in the first Saudi flight going back to Bombay. The Saudi airline agreed to take the 2 female passengers back to India, but since the female passengers have been ordered to be deported by the Saudi senior airport official, they requested the Saudi government pay for their return tickets. When the airport security contacted the proper office in the Saudi government administration and informed them about the demand of the Saudi airline, the office refused to pay for the tickets of the 2 Indian female passengers who arrived without their passports. The government office then advised the airport personnel to refer the case of the two female Indians to the Indian airline representatives at the Jeddah International Airport. The Indian airline representative rejected the request of the airport officials and made it noticeably clear that they were not going to spend a single dollar on the transfer of illegal Indians who were to be deported to India. Then, the airport officials contacted the Indian airline headquarters in downtown Jeddah. The main office of the Indian airline rejected the request and argued that it is not the Indian airline's responsibility to pay for the deportation of illegal Indians or unlawful visitors from India. Finally, the case of the two illegal Indian aliens reached the Indian consulate in Jeddah City. The consulate said it would neither issue passports nor pay for the deportation of the two female Indian passengers who smuggled themselves on board a Saudi aircraft to a foreign country without official documentation. It put the responsibility on the Saudi airplane crew, who allowed them to climb on board without their Indian passports. At last, the case of the two illegal female passengers has reached the Indian embassy in the capital city of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Likewise, the Indian ambassador at Riyadh City rejected the demand of the officials of the Jeddah International Airport and washed his hands from the whole matter. He said, "It is not the responsibility of the Indian embassy to extradite a citizen of his country to his or her homeland who has been smuggled or sent as an alien to a foreign country." Eventually, when every concerned party refused to shoulder the responsibility of deporting the two illegal Indian female citizens, the Saudi police authority placed Rayhana and her daughter Ifat under arrest and arranged for their transfer to Jeddah's Women's Central Jail. It considered their cases to be offenses and must be dealt with at a court in Jeddah. While these phone conversations are taking place, Rayhana and her daughter have been placed in a small police lockup at the airport. They spent a few days in that small lockup. They do not know about what is going on regarding the discussions for their transfer back to India. They received free meals and felt grateful to enjoy such delicious Arab food. They have been made to sleep on the floor in a small room that has a toilet. They have been told to use the toilet for drinking water and to urinate and defecate too. A few days after the day of their arrival, two Saudi policemen came and took them out of the airport's small lockup. They handcuffed Rayhana's hands behind her back, but her daughter's hands were not placed in handcuffs. Only when her hands have been handcuffed does Rayhana understand that she is in trouble. She asked the two police officers why they were arresting her, but she did not get an answer because none of them could understand Hindi. The two Saudi policemen could only speak Arabic. Then, Rayhana tried to show them their Saudi visas, but they just ignored her official papers, took them inside their police car, drove out of the international airport, and headed toward the crowded city of Jeddah. While the police car is building up speed and traveling through the busy streets of the city, Rayhana is looking at the people who are walking on the pavement. The first sight that caught her attention was the two kinds of human creatures that were walking along the streets. She recognized the men from their white clothes and their long beards. During the 3 weeks of her honeymoon in downtown Bombay with her handsome lover, she saw many of Calaba's foreign visitors dressed up in that fashion. She even recollected that her Saudi sponsor wore the same strange clothing. The long jilbab that each man was wearing appeared to her to be like a woman's nightgown. She could see the men's private parts through slightly transparent clothing. She also saw some small turbans on their heads which looked like adult diapers. The other types of human creatures she saw were women. If human society is not made up of men and women, she would not have known that those fully concealed creatures are human beings. Each woman is fully covered from head to foot by a black burqa. For Rayhana, those women look like black ghosts or scary vampires. She is worried that her Saudi sponsor might force her to put that black bag over her head and use it to conceal her entire body. She is scared that if he made her wrap up her entire body like that, she might not be able to breathe and die a slow death due to suffocation. Rayhana ignored the strange-looking human beings and began to take in the view of the beautiful tall buildings. She was surprised when she could not see any slums, shacks, or any other types of poverty-stricken houses. Once again, she reminded herself Allah has blessed the people of His holy land because they are so righteous and worship Him from their hearts. After a long drive, Rayhana could no longer see human beings or buildings. She could not see any trees or mountains. Wherever she looked, She saw the empty sands of the desert wasteland. Rayhana thought that if she is in the hands of the Bombay police in India in such a deserted and empty place, they would rape her first and then kill her. She remembered how the Indian police had beaten her and abused her in jail. She thanked Allah that she had been arrested by Muslim police officers. She thought that she and her daughter were safe in the hands of these most righteous city policemen who fear the highest Allah and His gracious Prophet Muhammad. When her eyes could not find anything else to see, Rayhana began to doze off, and finally, she fell into a deep sleep. While she was sleeping inside the police car, she began to snore. She is so exhausted from her long trip from India to the Holy Land, and the long time she had spent with her daughter in that small police lockup at the Jeddah International Airport. Her daughter fell asleep as soon as the police car left the international airport and entered the city streets. For some time, the lovely Rayhana and her cute daughter Ifat fell asleep like two innocent female babies sleeping on the laps of their father and mother. Chapter 43. A brutal sexual assault in the Sahara Desert. The peaceful sleep of the lovely Indian maidservant was violently interrupted when the rough hand of a man shook her head and woke her up. She has found one of the two Saudi policemen sitting so close to her. She became extremely scared when she discovered that a man was sitting near her in the back seat until his body was touching her. Before she fell asleep, her daughter was sitting by her side. She tried to move away from the Saudi policeman, but she could not because she was hemmed in by the car door and his body. She spoke to him in Hindi and told him to move away from her. The Arab policeman does not pay any attention to what she is saying to him and begins to touch her body lustfully. She began to tremble and her body was stunned by fright. It took her a few seconds to overcome her fear and shock. The Saudi policeman moved his hand from Rayhana's shoulder, took hold of one of her breasts and began to fondle it. Rayhana decided to act fast and she then pushed him away through her head. But she could not use her hands because they were handcuffed behind her back. The policeman caught her by the chin and forcefully began to kiss her on the lips. Rayhana struggled violently to release her lips from his mouth. She managed to free her mouth for a few seconds before he overpowered her again. She has butted him with her forehead and even bitten his lips. The policeman released her lips and began to squeeze her breast, and his other hand slid down quickly to her private parts. Then, he tried to pull out her dress. In a few minutes, Rayhana had done everything she could to prevent him from undressing her. By this time, she has understood what he is up to. While she is struggling to free herself from the policeman who is trying to rape her, Rayhana suddenly heard her small daughter begin to cry and call her mother for help. The unexpected vicious attack of the Arab policeman has made Rayhana forget her little daughter. She is shocked when she realizes that her small female child is not with her inside the car. She turned her face and looked out of the car. She could not believe her eyes when she saw the second Saudi policeman holding her daughter's hand and trying to make her touch his fully exposed and erect penis. He is half naked. His trousers and underwear are rolled down. He is standing out of the car with his phallus fully exposed before her 7-year-old daughter. The evil policeman has forcefully managed to make the little girl hold his penis in her right hand. Then, he tried to make her insert his penis in her mouth and suck it for him. At first, Rayhana thought she was still asleep and having an awful nightmare. The never-ending groping of her assailant and her daughter's screams bellowing and hauntingly in her ears made her senses believe that what she was seeing was more than real. When her senses realized the impact of what she was seeing, Rayhana became furious and began to use her feet to kick violently at the policeman who was molesting her inside the car. The shock of seeing a grown man trying to rape her little daughter outside the car is more than she could bear, and she fought with all her might to try and save her. Meanwhile, the Saudi policeman is trying to subdue the outraged Indian woman in every way he can. He hit her in the face several times and tried to close her mouth with his hands, but he could not. Every part of her body is moving and pushing him away from her. If her hands were not handcuffed behind her back, she would have strangled him to death and rescued her female child. When he could see she is going to be hard to control, he shouted at his colleague and informed him that the Indian woman might kill him if he did not let go of her daughter. He understood that when the Indian woman heard her daughter crying and saw what his colleague was trying to do to her little girl out of the car, she became extremely angry, aggressive, and difficult to control. Despite that, the other policeman does not respond to the words of his colleague and continues with his evil act upon the defenseless small daughter. He began to hug the little child and rub his penis on her body while trying to kiss her small mouth. Rayhana began to scream and cry out loudly and showered the evil policeman with all the bad words she knew in Hindi. The policeman ignored her outpouring of insults, which he does not understand anyway. Rayhana knew she could not stop these evil men from raping her and abusing her daughter. She decided to give up her resistance and allow the men to rape her alone and spare her 7-year-old daughter. She used her body language to signal to the policeman who is trying to rape her to ask his friend to stop touching her daughter and come inside the car and do whatever he wants to her. The policeman understood her body language and got out of the car and caught hold of his colleague and told him what the Indian woman wanted and agreed for them to do. The evil Arab man is not willing to release the small daughter until his colleague has managed to snatch her away by forcing the female child from his strong holding. The evil policeman has become extremely angry as a wild beast whose easy prey has been just snatched away from him. His game is over and he can no longer play this wicked vile act he is enjoying so much. Therefore, he ran like a leopard in leaps and bounds to the police car in his hunt for another female victim. He caught hold of one of Rayhana's 2 legs and literally pulled her out of the car like a lamb that had become ready for slaughter. When the surrendered Indian woman got out of the car, he stripped off his remaining underwear and became fully naked without a shred of a piece of cloth. He then straddled Rayhana's body as she surrendered like a lamb to the slaughter, and he began to rape her violently. While he is doing that, his tongue is licking and sucking the lips of Rayhana as a mad dog. He even began to bite her lips and cheeks as if he is a wild beast that is trying to eat up her flesh. The other Saudi policeman joined him, and the 2 evil men began having sex with Rayhana both at the same time. One is raping her from the front and the other sodomizing her from behind. These 2 Arabs, as if they are men beasts, have never touched a woman before. One is inserting his erect penis in her vagina and the other one is forcing his phallus in her anus. While they are raping her, they are biting and hitting her viciously and violently. Meanwhile, Rayhana is screaming while trying to silence the unbearable torture the 2 Saudi demons are inflicting on her naked body. She has endured their violent and sadistic rampage motivated by love for her small daughter. She knew that if she resisted or tried to stop them, they would leave her and go for her defenseless daughter. Little Ifrit saw everything from the moment the 2 evil men of the holy city of Allah stripped her mother naked and ripped off her clothes. They made her fully naked. The small daughter saw when they began raping her as she stood by herself out of the car crying and begging the 2 policemen to stop and leave her mother alone. She screamed and begged on her knees, "Please stop. Please stop. Leave my mother alone. You are hurting her." She has done everything she could to ask them to stop, but they continue their evil acts. She watched with eyes clouded in tears, and yet her pleadings went unanswered. There is nothing she can do to help her mother. The 2 Saudi police officers violently raped Rayhana Khan until she lost consciousness and her soul has become hovering between life and death. The wicked Arab men are not satisfied with leaving her unconscious body undisturbed, but they continued to rape her lifeless body. Each one of them raped her 3 times in her vagina and sodomized her twice in her anus until the blood ran down her private parts from front and behind. Finally, when they had become fully satiated with their lust, they got into their police vehicle and drove away, leaving her for dead. Before they left, they put on their police uniforms, but they neither bothered to put their victim's clothes back on nor cover her naked body. They do not care about her crying, small daughter. They expected both mother and daughter would eventually die in the hot desert, and their bodies would be buried by the shifting winds of sand. They know either they will be bitten by a poisonous snake or scorpion or die of thirst in the arid desert. They have decided to return to their police headquarters and report that the Indian woman and her daughter somehow managed to fool them and escape. They agreed to say that the 2 illegal Indian female aliens, Rayhana Khan and her daughter Ifrit Khan, said they wanted to go to the women's public washroom, and then both mother and daughter jumped out of the back window and fled. After the two human demons left, little Ifit went over to her unconscious naked mother and covered her mother's exposed private parts with the dress that had been ripped from her body. She tried to awaken her mother thinking she was asleep. She shook her mother's body vigorously and called to her to please wake up, but her mother did not respond. Ifit has remembered that her father had killed himself by stabbing his heart with his knife, so she has already some idea about death. She began to think the police officers had killed her mother while they were beating her and doing those terrible things to her. She had seen everything they had done to her mother, but she did not understand what they were doing, why they were removing all her clothes, or what her mother had done to make them angry with her. After they left, she believed her mother was dead, and she stood up and began to wail loudly with a strong outcry. The place is a desolate desert area located far away from the city. It is on a deserted road where cars very rarely pass by. It is evening and the sun is setting. It started to get dark and Ifit became frightened. She has no idea what to do, and she is afraid to leave her dead mother to go in search of help. Ifit was sitting beside her mother where she cried and cried until she almost lost her voice. Finally, she fell asleep on her mother's body. It started to turn cold within a couple of hours after the sun went down. The chills shook Rayhana out of her long-deadened state of unconsciousness. She forced herself awake. She is in horrific pain radiating from every part of her body. She then remembered what had happened to her, and she moved quietly so as not to wake up her daughter. She moved her daughter's head slowly from her lap and strained to get up on her knees. She tried to stand, but she could not. She discovered she was completely naked except for a single piece of clothing draped across her. She dragged her sore and aching body across the sand and began to collect her scattered clothing piece by piece. Her movements woke up Ifit, and Rayhana told her daughter to close her eyes until she could put her dress back on. Her daughter obeyed her and closed her eyes. It took Rayhana more than half an hour to put on her clothes. The terrible pain and dormant body have slowed down her movement. Then she told her daughter to open her eyes. Ifit stood up and ran to her mother and hugged her. She felt so relieved when she saw that her mother had come back to life. Rayhana knows that Ifit has seen everything those evil policemen have done to her. She remembered hearing Ifit's tender voice screaming and crying for her while those vicious animals tore her apart and ripped off her clothes. While they were stripping her naked in front of her small female child, she felt as if they were skinning her alive. They had removed her handcuffs and stripped every piece of clothing off her body. She could not resist or try to protect her honor. She was afraid if she resisted, they would go for her little daughter instead of her. She was thus paralyzed by the thought of these ruthless men raping and attacking her daughter. At this difficult time in her life, if it were not for her daughter, Rayhana would have killed herself. It is one of the customs of Indian women. They tend to kill themselves if they get raped because society expects that from them. Ifit's loving touches and hugs have given Rayhana strength, and she asked her daughter to help her stand up. Ifit has tried to pull her mother up by her hands with all the strength she has, but she could not be able to help her mother get up. Rayhana decided to crawl on her knees and move away from the place where she had been raped in front of her little daughter. She felt her body had been ruined and defiled by the ungodly policemen in that place, and it now has become unholy ground. She hopes that if they moved away from the unclean spot where her blood is spilled and her body is raped, maybe her beloved daughter would soon forget and not remember what has happened to her dear mother. The abused Indian woman has crawled away very slowly, and then she became exhausted to the point where she has to stop and rest. The pain she felt exerting her body was more than she could bear. When she felt she was far enough away, she asked her daughter to sit on her lap. She ached terribly from the wounds and injuries she received to her body, and the pain is beyond anything she has ever experienced. Some of her wounds are still copiously bleeding, and she tried to hide them from her daughter. She feels as if there are hundreds of sharp metals that have been forcefully inserted in her private parts and remained inside. The pain is beyond her ability to bear it. She tried to hide her pain and the emotional trauma, hoping if she pretended nothing was wrong, her daughter would soon forget everything that had happened to her mother. With all that she has endured and survived, She worried most about her daughter's welfare and how she could get her to a safe place. Rayhana worried even more when she realized in a place like this her beloved daughter could be bitten by a snake or scorpion if she had not frozen to death in the cold desert air during the night. While in and out of a hazy comatose state, Rayhana thought that she was living through an awful nightmare. She could not wrap her mind around what had happened to her in the Holy Land, where the tomb of her prophet Muhammad and the house of Allah stand. It is the last thing she would have ever imagined could happen to her in the most sacred place on earth. Her scanty knowledge of Islam has made her believe that Jeddah is Mecca city, whereupon reigned the house of Allah, and Medina city, where the tomb of her prophet Muhammad was laid to rest. In fact, from Jeddah to Mecca, it will take around 1 hour and a half hours to drive a distance of 80 kilometers. It is the most crowded road in the world. Over 3 million pilgrims travel every year on that single highway. If Rayhana had had any knowledge or warning that this terrible thing was going to happen to her in such a holy Muslim land, she would have never come. Of course, for that matter, no mother in the world would ever dream of her 7-year young daughter witnessing such a brutal rape. Whatever she allowed or suffered at the hands of the 2 wicked Arab men, it is because she wanted to save her little girl from being raped and violated by these dangerous criminals posing as public servants. Rayhana's mind has been occupied with many thoughts bubbling up like hot, molten lava inside a volcano. She wants to cry, but she suppressed her tears and has not allowed them to disclose the deep pain and anguish she is feeling inside. It is best not to fall apart in front of her small daughter, and so she is hiding her fears, worries, and all the devastation she felt. She hated herself for bringing her daughter with her and exposing her to such sheer evil. Only the devil could do this to a human being and not care about raping a mother in front of her small female child. If only she had foreknowledge that the devil is alive and well inside the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is the holiest Muslim land on earth, she would not have come out of her birthplace and come to such hellish land. Rayhana could not believe a human being could become like a beast. How could a human being lust after a 7-year-old daughter? How could a man behave in such a beastly manner? What troubled Rayhana more was the fact that those 2 police officers were Muslims like her. While she was living in her slum hut surrounded by thousands of Hindu men, none of them attacked her while she was walking all alone in the dark hours of the morning in the narrow alleys, or assaulted her inside her unprotected hut. She had never been attacked by anyone, and no man had attempted to rape her while she was returning all alone at night through those dark and narrow lanes. Her Hindu neighbors are bowing down and worshipping their idols day and night, whereas the 2 Muslim men who have brutally raped her are supposedly kneeling and worshipping her Allah 5 times a day. Rayhana began to feel dizzy and her eyes began to flutter uncontrollably. She understood that she might collapse and faint at any moment. She wants to tell her daughter to leave her and continue walking with the hope that she might find someone to rescue her. She does not want her daughter to see her dying in such a lonesome place. She figured she is going to die anyway. When she could not crawl anymore, Rayhana shared her thoughts about what she wanted her daughter to do. She told her to continue walking and not look back. But little Ifit is scared and refuses to leave her mother and walk all alone in the dark and lonely dead of night. Rayhana feels her child's anxiety and fear and does not insist that she leave her anymore. She has gently told her that if she fell asleep, she might never wake up again. She reminded her of how her father had fallen asleep and had not returned to them. She then told her plainly that she was going to die soon, and when that happened, she should leave her and go away, and hopefully, she would find someone to rescue her life. Shortly after speaking these words to her daughter, Rayhana stopped crawling, and her body fell silently into the sand and became motionless. Her daughter thought that her mother had died and would never wake up again. Therefore, the little girl Ifit is afraid to walk alone in what is a strange, dark, and frightening place. She just sat near her mother's body and began to weep all over again. She has become so afraid and started to shake, trembling from the chill of the brisk night winds. Her fear has prevented her from falling asleep, and she remained awake throughout the night while unceasingly crying.